Thank you so much for being here. Merci beaucoup d'être ici aujourd'hui. On est super ravis que vous êtes là avec nous. This is a really important subject. My name is Melanie. I'm the Executive Director at the Ottawa Music Industry Coalition, la coalition de l'industrie de la musique d'Ottawa. We are happily partnering with Debaser for this winter edition of Pique. This is a panel that's put on with thanks to Ontario Creates and the City of Ottawa. It's a really great pleasure to be able to invite folks from town and folks from out of town to share their knowledge and experience. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge that the land that we gather and work and laugh and grieve on is the unceded, unsurrendered Anishinaabe Algonquin territory, and it has been for time immemorial. And as a non-Indigenous person, it's important for me to go beyond the acknowledgement and really think about what decolonizing a space looks like in everyday life. And it's a great pleasure to host a panel. Essentially, I think at the root of it, Brave New Models is exactly that. It's everything we want it to be and everything that it is. And so I'm excited to hear from these four panelists today. I'm going to hand it over to James Goddard, who is going to moderate this panel. And big thanks to Jamieson on the sound for us today. Give it up.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This panel, as Melanie mentioned, is called Brave New Models, and we're looking at sort of a bunch of different stuff, but sort of circulating around the ways that like multidisciplinarity, doing lots of different things can be a path to sustainability for creatives in the current landscape, obviously with a special focus on practices that intersect with music. So my name is James Goddard, as was mentioned. I'm an artist. I've been a festival director, concert promoter, and every other kind of arts administration possible. And I'm joined by a wonderful group of panelists with a wide range of experiences and expertise. Among other commonalities, two things we hope to explore today and that all these panelists represent is that they share a willingness to wear different hats and a desire to create for the benefit of a bigger community. So I think we'll start things off by letting y'all introduce yourselves. Maybe if we can move from Luigi down.
So I want to start by thanking everybody for being here and OMIC and Debaser for having me a part of this panel. And I'm happy to be here with my other panelists. It's an honor. So my name is Luigi Fidelia. I also go by City Fidelia. I was born in Montreal, but I moved here when I was like 3 years old. Music was always my passion. So basically in 2013, 2014, around then, I decided to move to Toronto to, I guess, chase my dream. And then 2016, I got like a big moment where I had a single that did really well. And that pretty much opened doors for me when it came to like songwriting and like the businesses I have now. So yeah, that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Hi, my name is Eman Safadi. I'm really honored to be here today. So I'm from Calgary, and I manage artists. I do talent management through our company Foreigners, and I manage 7 artists across Canada, including Cartel Madras. And I also run a production company out in Calgary, also called Foreigners, where we amplify QT BIPOC stories and narratives. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Chachi, aka Méchant Vaporwave. Also super grateful to Debaser. I absolutely love their organizing, and I'm touched that they invited me to be with so many awesome people and experiences. I'm a multidisciplinary visual artist, and at the moment my primary work is with Backwash as her creative director and manager, and yeah, mainly based out of Montreal.
All right. Well, you all mentioned, different things, narrative production, art, creative design, and you mentioned you having businesses. So I'm curious how, if you could elaborate a bit on how your various practices intersect with music and how they like feed each other. And maybe we can start at the other end this time with Méchant Vaporwave.
Oh, yeah. So I guess like for me, I've always loved the connection of music and visuals. Like early, like elementary, high school, it was like all coming home and watching like MTV, Much Music, music videos, and like waiting for your favorite ones to come back. And like I think as a designer, like having to abstractly like take something and represent it visually, I think with music, it's similar as well. Like how do you take that feeling and that story that the artist is trying to tell and really like just when you see it, you know exactly what it is. You're intrigued, that kind of thing. And then from the management perspective, I guess like when you're project planning, you're doing a lot of your own project management in design. You really have to be detail oriented. So I think that translates really well for music because there's so much unexpected that can happen that you have to like both be able to look at the little details and then also like zoom out and be like, okay, like how do we get from point A to B, like even transportation, like that kind of thing. So nice overlap. Yeah.
For me, we wouldn't have a production company if it wasn't for music. So we initially, because of the artists that I manage, we don't have, I mean, their resources are limited when it comes to like the visual production, you know, making music videos and content for social media. So we got very creative and we started producing our own visuals for each of the artists that I manage. And then when COVID hit, everybody's livelihood went down the toilet because like there was just no live shows, and even music discovery was nil because a lot of people decided to go back to music that they were comfortable with, especially in the early days of the pandemic. So even in terms of like our streaming numbers decreased when we were releasing singles. So what we did in response is because we had some experience in visual productions through music videos, we decided to embark on a video production company to see if we can all generate revenue so we can all eat. And it actually turned out to be quite fruitful that we have now a team in Calgary that we work with that does video production across Canada. So if it wasn't for music and if it wasn't for the pandemic, like it really did help us shift in a way that both of it are just so intertwined now.
I would say for myself, at a young age, music had like a lot of impact on me and the individuals that lived in my neighborhood. So we would often go to like the projects and like break dance and go to different neighborhoods and like freestyle battle. So for me, I always told myself that like, you know, once I get in a good position with music, I wanted to develop like a hub for people to have access to like a space where they could be creative, like work on video production or make music. So a lot of my business ideas a lot of them are about like what would my younger self need in order to succeed. And I would say like that's the biggest part of my business model with everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you both, Eman and Luigi, you mentioned like businesses, and I'm curious in like when we're talking about businesses, we're talking about private commercial practices or nonprofits. Like how does that work? How does that kind of organization play into things?
Sure. For me, like I don't know, I'm sure a lot of people don't know, but like I fell backwards into music. Like I was not a musician growing up. I was on a weird career path where I was just trying to be some kind of, you know, I was trying to kind of climb some corporate ladder, and it turns out the person next to me like stopped one day and was also like finished her master's and like was on this career path, and turned one day to me and said, like, I'm gonna become a rapper. And I was like, I'll be your manager. I had no idea what that meant. Like, I thought, like, I had no idea. Like, and I was in my 30s when that happened. So, like, I was never engrossed in the music careers or music industry. And so when Contra, who's one part of Cartel Madras, like, formed the band with her sister, and then we all kind of embarked on this together, I had to really treat, because I didn't have that frame of reference of the music industry, the only frame of reference I had was business. Like, I was always in business, I was always in sales, like, from the time that I graduated university up until that point. And so I took a very different approach, apparently, where, you know, because I wasn't trying to, like, get in people's pockets or, like, try to know who's who in the industry, I just kind of treated it like a business. And I think it was very fruitful for us, because it's kind of like I had these myopic blinders on, and just seeing it in such a different lens really did help us kind of move through it a lot quicker, I would say, because our goals were very organized within the structures of, like, you know, like a corporate structure. Like, we did a SWOT analysis when we first started. Like, who does that? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just like some things that you really don't hear or you do with artists, but we definitely did take now I see a very unorthodox approach that did pay dividends for us. So, yeah, so I think my experience is probably different than a lot of artists, because, you know, ask me to play I have no idea. Like, I had to learn SoCan, like, 2 years after I started managing. It's just a whole thing, right? So, yeah, so I think that's where it came from.
I'll say, yeah, my experience is kind of the reverse. It was, like, more, I guess, community driven, and then I learned the business through that. Because before, basically what drove me to open my studio was there was this really talented artist in the city called Metro that passed away, and I was a big fan of his music, and I really related to the story he was telling in his music. And I always told myself that, you know what, I want to be able to see a talent like that and create a space for them to be like, okay, I have a home, like, after work or after school, whatever they're doing, where I could express myself and, like, stay out of trouble. So from there, I would, like, sit down with counselors and stuff, like, pitch them to the idea. They'd be like, nodding their head, like, yeah, this is a good idea. But I'm like, all right, so where's the money? You know, never an answer, you know. So I'm a strong believer of, like, you know, sometimes you have to put your money where your mouth is. And, you know, I decided to put my own money up to open my space and start programs myself. But then what that allowed me to do is see how it works, you know, like, how budgeting works, like, because I would have to pay engineers, I had to pay project managers and all that stuff to make it work. And with that, now I have, like, a strong framework as to, like, what I need in order to apply for grants and partner up with, like, other nonprofits and things of that nature.
And so, yeah, like, you mentioned community, so maybe, like, let's jump onto that community train. Like, how do you, I mean, it's pretty clear with your answer, Luigi, but, like, how does community interact with your practice, and how do you see the artist's role in community, or the obligations that an artist has to their community? And maybe we can start again with Méchant on the other end there.
Yeah, so I think that the community that, like, primarily I end up working with, because I can't, like, do what I do with Backwash necessarily with any people because of the nature of the collaboration. But what I do is I offer, like, queer artists who are, you know, just starting, which, like, I very recently was also just starting, like, consultation and, like, advocating. Sometimes that looks like, you know, even writing an email to negotiate for something better, or letting them know what they can or can't ask for, mainly can ask for, because there's a lot. And I think that a common thing that happens is like, as trans people, like, I think with the group that I happen to work with, it's like we're all like maybe late 20s, early 30s, and I think only now allowing ourselves to like delve into art in a very creative way. So already coming with like those ideas of like, well, I've only just allowed myself to even like consider this space. So it's like kind of like unpacking that and creating environments where you get to like experience something you would have liked. So with Backwash, when we were starting to play, like, we really wish that she had more opportunities to work with like Black artists who made like really cool like experimental music. And now like what's cool is that we're able to put that in the negotiation process, where it's like when she's headlining, one of the first things we ask is like, can we choose the lineup? Can we negotiate their contracts as well? Please make sure like travel and accommodations are in there, because it can just like, you know, anything that can take energy out of a person who then has to spill their heart out on stage. It's like, what can we do to keep that energy up and like not drain you, so that like you can then like figure out your next step, you know? So yeah, those are some ways that we've been able to do it. Yeah.
With us, because we're based in Calgary, we do have a fairly sizable QT BIPOC population, but I would say just the music industry in Calgary and the music community is very segregated. Not necessarily by like racial lines, but it's just our music industry is slowly dwindling, because like a lot of live spaces and a lot of venues are going away. And so what we've done is we've really connected to pillars within the Calgary community who has really been important figures within the city, and aligned with them in order to help build a stronger community for artists, especially within like, electronic, hip hop, and a lot of the realms that our artists, the genres that they perform in or that their music practice is built in. So we've really tried to not only like leverage their like cartel, not just Cartel Madras, but any of the artists' success. There's a few artists that I manage in Toronto who have a really good fan base within like Eastern Canada, but not necessarily in Western Canada. So we try to leverage that connection too with the Calgary community, so they have more experience or more interactions with artists that they may not be familiar with it from out east. But then we also try to build opportunities too in Calgary for up and coming and emerging artists to have an opportunity to showcase their work to a larger audience too. So we're really trying to like build something bigger in Calgary, even though we may not have the infrastructure to support it, but just making sure that we are working within the community and learning from our community as we go through this. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say the history of like a lot of successful individuals in Ottawa is that like, they would get their moment and kind of like leave and never really come back. Like, for example, like the Weeknd, his whole team is from Ottawa, you know what I mean? And a lot of people don't know that, but they all started here and then moved to Toronto, and then now they're in LA. And so I guess in my situation, what was special is that kind of like the community built me, you know what I mean? Like they saw me at 10 years old, 11 years old, like working my way up, and no matter how high I got, like how much success I got, I was always like attainable. So it allowed other people around to be like, okay, well, if City could do it, I could do it as well. So I think when it comes to my artistry and community, I think it's just, important for just artists in general to give back to where they come from, because that's the only way that the chain is going to continue, and the future generation is going to be able to have access to things that they didn't have access to before.
Yeah, and Well, you all kind of mentioned in different ways leveraging sort of, for lack of a better term, power within the industry and using that to bring people up. So just wondering, maybe are there any specific things that you've learned in your journey about advocating for yourself and for the artists you work with, in terms of sort of maybe pushing back at some of the exploitative ways that the industry can use people?
I've been in many situations where, like, because when you're an artist trying to come up, like, a lot of your money goes into making the music. So for the most part, like, most artists don't have that much money, you know? And even though, like, they could be making a lot of noise. So I've been in a lot of situations where the advance look amazing and I was, like, starving, but I knew that they wouldn't be open to giving me ownership of what I want to do and give me full creative control, you know? So luckily, like, the deal I'm in now, I did a joint venture and I really put in my contract that I want creative control and ownership of my music. And that allowed me to now build a relationship with the president of the label. And now whenever I go, like, on tour or, like, I do activations in the States or whatnot, like, I've now built a relationship where I could play them other Ottawa artists. Or when I was in Toronto, like, a lot of the industry out there too, like, they really love my music and what I'm doing. So it's like, sometimes when there's an artist in Ottawa that's doing, like, really well, I'll bring them to Sony or Universal to get that experience of, like, sitting in front of an A&R and picturing their music and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely think I kind of went on a rant there. I don't know but yeah, basically, yeah, there's gonna be moments where, you know, the deal is gonna look good, but it's not necessarily what you should take. I think you should always go back to your, like, moral compass and what you believe in. And I think, like, long term and when it comes to longevity in this business, that would be the best way to look at things.
No, I definitely agree. I think it's that, especially when you're starting, you may get an amazing deal or you make an amazing opportunity and they may cross your boundaries and ask you to do something crazy or what. Like, and sometimes it's more subtle. Sometimes it can be very blatant where it just doesn't align with, like, not only your morals as, like, a person, but as an artist. I think you just have to say no. Like, it doesn't matter. For somebody who, you know, who has experienced a lot of very weird asks from my artists, like, you know, I can give you some crazy examples, like, you know, a lot of artists that I represent are South Asian, and, you know, I've had so many promoters and important promoters in this country ask if they can rap in saris, and, like, and that's something that is just, like, appropriating a culture, but, like, one where, you know, another artist that I manage is Muslim and she wears, like, a headscarf, and just asking if, like, they could tear off her scarf, you know, as an act of protest, even though it's her choice to wear, you know, the headscarf. And so even though, you know, people's intentions may not be blatantly racist or, like, blatantly bad, but not understanding the context as why these boundaries are put into place and putting essentially their safety in jeopardy, like, no deal is worth it. Like, no, it doesn't matter how powerful the person is. It doesn't matter who the individual or the organization is. And it's really knowing that and not feeling that pressure that you have to abide to something that really makes you feel, you know, puts you in that position where you're, like, kind of, like, debating whether it's good for your career or, you know, are you going to burn a bridge? It does not matter. Like, as long as you stay true to yourself, other opportunities are going to come along that's going to be aligned, and you'll never feel sorry for that. Where you may feel sorry or exploited if you were to take the opportunity, and it doesn't matter what doors it open, is it worth it? You need to ask yourself that. So even though power structures may come into play, we really try our best to make sure that everybody is heard within our camp and that their boundaries, their safety, and their wishes are always is always taken into consideration with the deal. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, like, that's a super good point. Like, you have to look out for the red flags, and that really like comes into play in a lot of things. It's like, for one, if it is something that is a short thing, like a show or something, like sometimes it is like more obvious where somebody's asking you to censor yourself, or, you know, we've had requests where it's like, could they perform but make it not political? And it's like, you know, like the moment that you're being asked to, you know, work at something, but also like not be seen as a human, it can be, it's funny because a lot of what we talk about is like, we're not even getting to always the music. That like seems to be like, it's also hard to fight for, but it's one of the things that's solved first. And then the rest is like a continuation of how do I like deal with all this other stuff, like the business stuff, the meeting people. I think like when it comes to like a lot of newer artists, it's just exciting for them to have their stuff seen. And it's like, even if you have a nice meeting with someone and you're like super excited and you ask questions and they answer the way that you'd like them to, if they hand you a contract and it's for something longer than 6 months even, hire a lawyer. Because we've had instances where like, you know, you're talking to people and they tell you one thing and then you look at the contract and it's exactly the fear that you stated. And it's like, you know, that's how it's better to take the risk, and it's not even a risk. It's just asking, would it be possible if this, would it be possible if that? And depending on the response you get, it'll also determine the treatment that you'll get later on. So if they respond badly and take the deal off the table, they would have given you a hard time anyway later down the line. And I think as hard as it can seem, eventually if you keep going at it, you're gonna find the right people. Yeah, if you're experiencing it, somebody else has too. But yeah, definitely contracts, even shows, look for things that limit you as an artist or don't respect you as a person, pretty much. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sort of jumping off something that Eman said, but also I think threaded through all of your responses there, maybe we could talk about instances of like how to navigate like tokenization in the music industry, and how sort of, you mentioned the sorry situation, but I suspect all of you've had instances where you're like, wait, why am I here again? Yeah. And so maybe we could talk, a little bit about how to navigate that.
I think it's like about being very honest with the person that you're working with, because like it's never fun to be in those positions where they're asking some request, and again, some of it's very innocent that, you know, especially if they're not of culture, if they're part of your culture, or they really don't see how it can be problematic. And so it's having, you know, it's just being very upfront and transparent about what you're comfortable, what you're, you know, if they are having a request that can either flatten or tokenize the person that you're representing. It's really, and sometimes it is exhausting to have conversations where you're like, that's not going to work and this is the reason why, and then you give the multitude of reasons, being like, there's a thing called, you know, colonization, there's a thing called, you know, appropriation, and you kind of have to have those hard conversations about it. But I think it's like, you know, it could be used as a learning for that individual where their very seemingly like innocent request can be problematic. And I think it's just always being very open with your artists about what's going on, and like, you know, sometimes they're like, you know, this is worth it for us and we don't mind being flattened, and we'll put on a bindi to like perform, you know, but that's completely their choice. But it really has to be with what they're comfortable with as individuals and as artists. But I think it's never compromising. I think that's the big thing, is that when you're having these requests about tokenization, and sometimes you do, like, and sometimes people feel like they're doing you a favor and say like, we'll book you because you check all of our boxes, which just happened too. So, you know, it's hard, right? And it's just about taking those moments and really trying to help them see where it can be problematic. Yeah, that's my response. I mean, I wish I wasn't so diplomatic. I wish I can just be like, what is this bullshit? And fortunately, it's just not the case. So I think you just have to have a level of professionalism, unfortunately, but just really coming to a common ground where they can see the error in their ways.
That was very well said. Like, I think you just, in any room or any situation, you just gotta be yourself. I think for myself as a artist and like someone that helps artists, I'm pretty straight up about my story. I'm pretty straight up about where I come from, and I'm pretty unapologetic about it because it's not easy to be here today where I come from. So I feel no way about expressing what my mission is in any room I'm in. So yeah.
I think one of my favorite things about the music industry is you can be so direct sometimes. Like, obviously, yeah, like, depending on your role, there's a way where people will, like, if they're worth talking to more, like, you can invite conversation, for sure. If it's, like, blatant that they've done something horrendous, like, you can walk away. But I do like that you can be so honest, and I think that going back to the negotiating too is like when something that, like, especially after the pandemic, isn't so obvious is that everyone, not everyone, but most people like working in the music industry and organizing are overworked. They're so busy and they don't always get the time to stop and reflect. And what can happen as a result is, like, even if everything from the get-go is good, something can happen down the line. For example, like, you could end up working the show date and have the host of the venue have, like, an incredibly racist security guard, which we've had before. And that can mess up your whole day. Or you can channel that and bring it to the stage. That's awesome too. But there are things that can even happen in the process later on. And I do think that for the most part, when you tell people, like, hey, like, this isn't okay, assuming that, like, if these are things that you're already thinking about, like, and considering about whoever you're working with, more often than not, they'll be like, you know what, I did all these decisions without even, like, being present and intentional, and, like, I appreciate that because what you're doing is basically work for them. You're improving what they're doing in the future. I find that music industry people usually just appreciate the initiative, even if it's uncomfortable, even if their response right away seems, like, weird. I hope that it at least, like, if they hear it, whereas maybe, I don't know, if you've been doing it for 20 years and you weren't so used to people telling you 20 years ago, it can, like, just get the wheels turning. But yeah, I think it's something we do is we actually have a clause in our contracts now because we learned that when it's not obvious from the get-go and later on something can happen, we have a clause that states, like, for shows specifically, if it's a moral and ethics clause, it's an artist policy, and it's like, should the festival or anyone associated to it, any of the partners, do anything that falls outside of our XYZ values, like if it's transphobic, if it's homophobic, if it's racist, like, we can cancel at any point and we don't have to pay for anything. And yeah, basically, like, it just protects you in terms of, like, not having to go and do a show with, like, just a bad feeling overall. Because something, I'll finish up soon, but yeah, something that could happen is also like in the promotion of the event. They could hire someone in their busyness, and this has happened to us, where it's like they can hire someone that writes a biography for you without running it by you. And if the artist's work is very nuanced and the person hired to write the promotion is like not from that background, they can just write the most racist thing ever and then publish it. And that's happened to us before. And it's like, luckily our bookers were like on it before we were. But I was like, we need like to know, like we're not doing this event, absolutely not. But also we need to know that there's been a sit down conversation with them, knowing like why this happened, how this happened, and like what's gonna happen after. And yeah, that did happen. And I think that like, it's those moments where it's like, you have to stop and think about what you're doing. So, yeah.
Well, you're all very gracious.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
To kind of go back to Chachi's point about busyness, and just a lot of these promoters are just like following whatever mandate that they're given. A lot of these tokenizations comes from granting bodies. Like, I just want to stress this. It's like there is a systematic issue in this country where, like they do want, in order to get a grant, if it's festival granting, they need to have X amount of representation, which is great in theory. But I think when it is thought of as an afterthought, like, okay, in order for us to be, fulfill the granting requirements, we need to make sure that we have X amount this and X amount that. That's where it becomes problematic, because then you instead of being the band that, or the person that they want to book, you're a person that they have to book. And so a lot of these expectations come in, and a lot of this problematic language and problematic conversations and expectations come in. So I think that is like, this conversation is an opportunity for us as a country to do better in terms of when you are looking to have, QT BIPOC artists, to make sure that, they're not an afterthought, but you are having the right representation, but with the right intention. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll see this often too, which is one of the arguments against sort of ratios, where floors become ceilings. And if they're like, oh, we want to have X amount of Black participation or Y amount of Indigenous participation, then it becomes all the Black, like it becomes a cap as well as a starting point, which I know the intent for a lot of the granting bodies is for it to be a starting point, but it can have the opposite effect. There's a couple threads in there that I wanted to pick up on, but maybe if we're on the topic of granting bodies, maybe we could talk about your various experiences with funding and granting bodies and how to access that or not access that.
I would say now that I got the opportunity to be on the other side, it did make me realize why, like most of my career, I never got approved for one, because like a lot of my music talks about growing up in a priority neighborhood in Ottawa, but that's not really the kind of Ottawa that presents themselves to the world. So if I'm writing a grant and I'm like, hey, I'm talking about the violence and the drug transactions that are happening where I'm from, and I want to be able to express my experience with that, but I have someone that's reading my application and be like, I can't relate to this. Of course I'm not going to get the grant, you know what I mean? And I remember when I got interviewed by the Citizen, like I think it was like 2 years ago, and they're like, it's crazy after all the accomplishments that you have, it's now that like you're getting your first article about anything, So I think it's definitely been like a tough road, like pretty much me coming up. But in these days, I think it's been easier because I did the footwork myself. I'm able to be like, I did it myself. I put on my own money, and look how good things look. Look how, you know, all these individuals got opportunities out of it. So, yeah, I think that's my experience right now with funding.
We suck at getting grants. We suck. Like, we do. Like, I would love to say, and here's my advice on grants. I have no advice because we never get grants. And so we've, in the beginning, it's because of a lot of the content that the artists that I manage is pretty, can be considered vulgar. And like, we've asked for, you know, from granting bodies, we've asked for like clean, like, you know, it being clean or radio edits, or if we are willing to put X amount of our, you know, on their EP to have clean content, and we always say no, just because it just doesn't fit the brand and the type of music that they want to make. So we have not gotten a grant. Like, and so we bootstrap everything. So that's why early on we operate the talent agency and our production company, we run it like a business. So like, we pay for everything, and if not, we'll get advance from like the record labels for the artists that are managed. But like, we have a whole business. We have a vending machine that we make residual income from, like in some like warehouse in Calgary that like people buy snacks, and then we use that to make music videos. Like, honestly, I'm being honest with you. And in a way, it's kind of freeing because like, even though we've gotten a grant for the production side and we've seen the reporting that comes with it, and it's like, it could be very stifling as an artist that you have to kind of hit certain like metrics for the granting body, and we also suck at reporting. So it just doesn't work for us. So like, having the ability to kind of fund everything ourselves is really great, because then we're not tied to anything. Would I like a grant? Absolutely. If there's a grantor here, please, let's talk and tell me what I can do better. But I'm not a person to give any granting advice, because as of yet, we have zero. So yes, and we've been doing this for 4 years. So.
Yeah, I think I'm also like probably not the best person to talk about grants. We haven't like applied for a ton of them. It is super interesting to like, and validating to hear that from the other side, they really do just kind of want to continue to feed into whatever narrative they know and want to keep hearing and are comfortable with. That's super frustrating. And yeah, I think that there are like slowly grants that I'm hearing about, and we just like got our first one through private radio funding. So it's Radio Star Maker Fund. They have like a fancier program overall that's like for people who've had like many, many thousands of sales. But what they've opened up is the Orion program, and the point is kind of to recognize that like in the industry, like it hasn't been fair, and it's a program for like Black, Indigenous, and people of color musicians who have less sales, still a bit, just to show that it's like you are taking this seriously, you want this to grow, and you have some experience, and the goal is to like fund any aspect of music, touring, videos, music production, like, and hopefully with that step, it's like one extra piece to help you get to the bigger funds, because I find that with the funding, they do want you to appeal to like larger media, or just go the traditional route. If you're not with a label, it's a lot harder. And for like the artists that I work with, for what they write about, like how they want to be treated, it's not always the most appealing for people who like want to make money, so, or want to satisfy like who they think can make them money. So it kind of like is a domino effect of like, well, I guess it doesn't even really make sense to apply to this one. So yeah, I think like there are also like probably funding out there. I know that they're there because I see other smaller artists popping up with really cool projects that are funded. But it is a lot of work, and it's nice to get support with that. I think like grant writers some of them will like work with you on it and only ask for money if like you win the grant. So there's a lot of like kind of skill sharing and DIY stuff that can still happen within that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a tangled web, and the difference between public and private funding, and the private radio broadcasters put all sorts of money into things like Radio Star Maker and Factor, and that's very different than the provincial, municipal, or federal funding bodies that, you know, are like the council, the arts councils, and it's complicated. It's a huge administrative task just to navigate that, let alone actually apply.
I think the craziest part of grants is the way the label system works, because Canadian majors will apply for grants and still like use it on the artist that they sign, and still have it like a recoupable cost, which is crazy to me.
It's robbery. It's robbery.
Yeah, that's something. I mean, going back to what we were saying about advocating for yourself and negotiating things, it's definitely worth looking out for, because, yeah, as you're saying, labels will get funded to put out your album, then they'll charge the artist that's for that same money, and it's like, wait, didn't the government pay for that already?
It's crazy, yeah.
Transparency is fantastic.
So another thing that came up in sort of a previous answer, you talked about overwork, and I think as creatives, that's maybe a familiar concept. So I wonder, like, given that you're all doing all these different things, have you ever encountered, you know, burnout, or how do you manage not being overwhelmed and being able to keep the art at a high level, but also the administration and the various different projects to keep the quality up when you're stretched thin?
Oh, man. Honestly, I don't even know how I do it. Yeah, I don't know how I do it, really. Like, I guess I'm blessed to have, like, I guess the team that I have around me to push me when it comes to making the music, because I'll say that's the appreciation that people in the city have for me, is that when I do put out music, it's quality music. But it does get hard, especially being a community person, because, like, you know, you'll have, like, big achievements, but because you're in the community, there'll be, like, someone that started making music yesterday being like, yo, but I want to get you on my song. But I'm like, you just started yesterday, you know? Like, you know, build your portfolio a bit more, and then we can see where we could go, you know? So it is, I guess, like, the challenge is finding balance as to, like, how much you give of yourself to people and to yourself. I'm still trying to figure that out, to be honest.
I'm still trying to figure that out too. I have no idea. Like, that's my 2023 resolution, is to, like, find some kind of balance, or just get a lifetime prescription to Ativan. I have no idea what that is. I think it's hard, especially with, like, an industry that's so unstructured, and, like, I can only speak on the management side. I'm not an artist. I see the amount of, like, effort and heart that artists have to put into their practice, into their art. It's not easy. And considering that music is so underfunded, like, musicians should be making a lot more for the effort that they put in. But unfortunately, with streaming, it's ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous. But I think as a manager, it's that, you know, how do you balance, you know, the business side of music and the business side of your artist, but then also not try to get tied in emotionally too? It's hard, because, like, I'm so invested in the lives of the artists that I manage, to the point that, like, their problems become my problems. Like, do I care that you didn't check your bag? Yes, it becomes my problem, but then it also becomes my stressor too. So, like, in terms of balance, I am not the person to, you know, some days I just, like, literally, like, put my phone on silent and I lay in bed and stare at a ceiling for 5 hours. I'm like, okay, I got this. You know, like, sometimes you just have to do that. But this is something that is such a crux in my life that, you know, I think there's not I mean, if somebody knows, again, granters and people who have a life balance, please talk to me. Any advice I would take. But it is tough, especially since you can be pulled in so many different directions, and, like, really trying to figure out where to prioritize your time, as well as prioritizing yourself, is, like, is tough. So yeah.
Yeah, I am definitely still figuring that out as well. I think, like, having been burnt out from other work before, I can kind of see the flags now, like the warning signs of when is it feeling like everything is piling up and I've done this to myself. And then it's kind of like a really good opportunity. I think that's also like the benefit of like working with like more community-based people rather than just like people who treat you like, I don't know, like corporate kind of like office, like work. Like, I think the cool part about it is like there is room to be like, okay, something here needs to be simplified or be put on the back burner. Because it's, at the end of the day, it's like when you have so much creative freedom, you can do anything. You can like work nonstop. There's always something. There's always like, from the business perspective, there's another thing you can add on. I find that also like when you start, like for me, when it's people I know, I have a especially hard time saying no to them when they ask for anything. So what I like practice myself is like, I won't say yes, I won't say no. I'll say, could you email me about it? And I'll get back to you. So it kind of gives me space to say, well, what do I need to know about this situation? Or even for the artist, it's like, you may, like where you put your time ends up being a decision where whether or not you might realize it, like deciding to do one thing means you're deciding not to do something else. So is that worth it to you? What would you rather be doing in this moment? And like operating that way is hard because also it makes everything very slow moving, and it also puts you in like a lot of financial stress when you're starting out, where it's like you're always putting the creativity and how you want to work first. So those things kind of, while you can work on them as well, like they're kind of harder. So, you know, sometimes when you're really, really new, I don't think it's a bad idea to have part-time work, maybe even totally outside of the industry, if you feel like you're, you know, sleep, eat, and breathing music all the time. Have something where it's like you can turn your brain off for a bit. And keep friends that are not in the industry at all. That sometimes you can talk about stuff and get so like overheated about it, and they could be like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, yeah, so I think that that's really important. But yeah, also still learning. I think it's like, as much as I go into things like hoping to have a process, hoping to take the time that it needs, it doesn't always happen that way, but it is so important to listen to your body, to your artists as well, like know where they're at, know what's happening in their life enough to just be like, it's okay. It's okay to take time. Like we have all the time to do the things. Yeah.
I know this one thing I started doing that's been helpful is just having sometimes a small budget to just hire people to do like the smallest things, because sometimes those little things add up. So like sometimes I pay like someone $200-300 to just like, yeah, just, you know, put invoices together, or just like little things that like you look at the email and you're just like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, I don't want to do this, you know. So that's been helpful, and yeah, I don't know, maybe you guys could try it out.
Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Totally.
Thank you.
Like you're buying time, basically, you know.
It's where my vending machine money's gonna go.
Yeah, and like in the context, I mean, this kind of, or one way of answering it, I think you kind of touched on there, Chachi, but have you ever encountered in sort of wearing different hats and working with different artists, have you ever had a conflict of interest, and how did you navigate that?
Yes. Yes. I think it's about being transparent. So
two of the artists that I manage are visual artists. They were like musicians who went into visual arts, and they are, you know, they do two very different visual art like practice. They work in two different mediums, but they bid on a lot of the same work. And it's usually me who has to bid on the work for them, you know, whether it's a mural project or like public art project or, you know, exhibition space. And, you know, so I think what I do is I'm just very transparent with them. Like, you have to be. Like, I think it's like, in terms of conflict of interest of like people that you're managing, like if you're not open and honest with them, like there's always going to be something that arises, like some kind of issue, some kind of jealousy, some, you know, just because everyone's kind of biting for, they're trying to advance their own art practice, and you as your manager is supposed to be on their side, right? And so if two people are bidding for the same things, it can kind of get a little sticky. So I think it's just being, you have to be open and honest and transparent, and just, you know, like if you're both applying to it, it's like both put an application form in, we'll see what happens, everybody's on the same page. I think the minute you start withholding information, or you're trying to like save feelings and not hurt the other person's feelings by not being open, that can kind of really make things really messy, and it can really cause things to kind of go in an uproar. Like with the artists that I manage, like I think because we have that practice within, you know, our company, it's like it really, we haven't had a lot of big conflicts, but it's because we just have an open door policy and open communications with each other. So yeah, I think that's the best way that we navigate it, but that's my answer.
Yeah, I agree with everything. It's I think from my personal experiences, I think the hardest thing is the like saying no to people, you know, because I don't know, it's like maybe they've been super helpful to you in other ways, and you're like, oh, like I really want to be grateful and show my gratefulness, but doing that is just like going to bite you eventually. So yeah, I think like there have been instances where I've gone into work with people, and it's a lesson learned, you know, sometimes you have to experience it firsthand, and you go into working with somebody who you know them, you really like them, you love their politics, you love their like aesthetic and all of that stuff, and that can be great, and you can just go into it like that, and then without discussing like roles or setting boundaries, or just really being like, at the end of the day there is one final approver, and that's really the artist, because that's who you're defending. It's not just like, unless you do go to someone and you're like, do whatever you want, and that's the boundary. It's like, truly, we can't say no to anything you do. But more often than not, there's a process of like respect and trust that has to happen first before you get too excited about the fun stuff. So it's like, and it's okay. It's even if you get along with the person and it seems like it would be a match made in heaven, still ask the like nitty gritty details. So for example, if an artist wants to go on tour with you, before going like, this is going to be awesome, like it's going to be a party, all of that, go through the contract the same way you would with any other professional. It's like, you have to, just because like the other artist, like let's say you need A, B, and C in order to do your show, in order to feel okay, maybe the other artist only needs A. And it's like much better to get that out in the beginning than later on to have it be an issue. But even later on, if it does become an issue, remember that it's not just to make someone else feel comfortable. It's like better to say, you know what, like it wasn't what we hoped for, but it's okay, we work differently, and it's just better to, yeah, at the end of the day, it's music. It's not yeah, you know.
It's not heart surgery.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Well, I might see if there's any questions in the audience. Does anybody have any questions in the audience? I got some more questions if you don't, but thought I'd open it up. Yeah?
Hi everyone, my name is Eman
Radio Star Maker Fund. Yeah.
It's pretty.
It's an old organization, but the program they have, it's called Orion program.
I think every artist has to utilize the internet as much as possible, because there's other places in the world that would really appreciate your art. It's not only Canada or United States. So it's, investing in digital marketers and stuff like that. I know it's expensive, but sometimes the things that we love and the things we really want to invest in, we gotta put our money in it. So I think for the style of music you're talking about, I would definitely explore that.
Yeah.
Personally.
Okay, if I managed you, this is what I would do. This is what, just from what you said, I would try to find festivals that plays music that is similar. I would look for, and don't look just in Canada. I would look in Canada, United States, really anywhere. I would get in touch with either their program director or their promoter. I would talk to them. I would ask them if if there's something that aligns with their festival. If not, I would ask them to connect you with somebody within their community, because their finger is on the pulse of who you need to be in touch with. So that's one way that I would do it with on the festival route, because you might be surprised, and it's not they might be yes, we would like you to come play our festival and give you an offer, or they might be okay, you're not there yet, or for whatever reason, they'd be but talk to this person. Always ask to connect you to somebody else, because usually people, when you're trying, they will connect. Don't ever send blanket emails. Get to know the person that you're looking to reach out to. Send them an email. Even ask for a time to meet with them over the phone. That's what I would do. The other thing that I would do is that if you're based in Ottawa, I would get in touch with your provincial music organization. In Alberta, we have Alberta Music, and so really sitting down with a representative there here in Ontario who can, help you. You may have to get a profession, get a membership, which is definitely worth it, and just really talking to them about what opportunities are available, if they have showcases, if they're connected to showcases, if they're connected to other producers or music industry individuals. That's what I would do. I would just start broadening your network to see where it kind of goes to, because you'd be surprised on what doors open for you. So that's what I would do. You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, that's such a smart idea. I know nothing about actual radio. I don't have a ton of experience there. I'm sure it's super challenging, but that's an excellent suggestion, because sometimes festivals will even have, at the festival itself, they'll have the radio station come in and do live interviews on site. So it's somebody knows someone that you know. It's just a matter of, asking around.
So registering all your stuff with SOCAN, because you might actually be getting plays that you don't even know about.
And Sound Exchange.
Yeah.
And Sound Exchange.
Sound Exchange, yeah. Because I've had friends or other artists who were put on some playlist in Germany they didn't even know about, and then they only found out because they got their playback on their SOCAN and their sound exchange receipts. So you might be getting listens you don't know about.
Yeah.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. My question sort of comes at this from the perspective of, I know we talked about how y'all are maybe not getting so much grant funding, but trying to build what you maybe call sustainable careers for your artists. I think in music right now there's this tension between chasing scale, like pro rata on the streaming side, everyone trying to compete for the same festivals. I'm wondering if any of you have any examples from your artistic practices or management careers of how you're helping your artists go maybe direct to fans or build from the community bottom up to make sort of sustainable revenue streams, whether that's Patreon or Ample, which is the co-op Patreon, or tokenizing communities is a new thing with blockchain, or more local ways. Just any examples would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, the way that we do it is that we kind of I look, because each of the people that I manage have different talents. They're, one is really good at marketing and one is really good at, and are you talking about a sustainable career specifically in music, or how can you make money while being a musician and not work a job that's going to take your soul away? Maybe that, because if it's how to make money as a musician, I'm, I think with it's just the typical streams you get on shows, and you really do advocate for yourself. If somebody's asking you for to play a show for $200 and you're is this ridiculous? No, I need $7. You can really lay it out exactly how much you need. So I think it's, what Chachi was saying is that you have to be an advocate for yourself. So if you're given an offer, make sure that the offer is fair for you. And so that's one way, because the minute you start asking for more money that you deserve, you will set a precedent that you will continue to get more money. So it's just not, who cares if it's a big festival? They have money, I'm telling you, and they're trying to keep their budget as tight as possible. But if you believe in yourself and you know how to negotiate properly, you can get more. That's one thing. If you are looking to, what we did is that we just find ways of so what we did in Calgary is that because we don't have a very big hip hop scene, we are a country folk indie music capital. Microbreweries too. It's really embarrassing. I'm sorry, Calgary. I hate my province. No, I love it, but I hate it. But so what we did is we actually threw underground shows. So so what we kind of built was this crazy community of people. We would throw underground secret shows in random locations across Calgary, in basements of people's houses and laundromats. We just did it in any random place, and then we would reveal the location the day of the event, and it just had this supply and demand craziness that we actually started we charged at the door, and we made quite good money. But we also built a community that if any of these artists that performed at these secret shows wanted to perform in traditional venues, they got really good money for it. So there is a way that you can kind of take control of your own career and do things. So with this show, instead of paying an artist fee, we managed to make good money. We sold liquor, we charged a door fee, and we walked away with probably the amount that an artist would make it during 10 shows. So we got really creative, and we just didn't take no for an answer, and we just kind of built our own, if we're we want to throw an art exhibition, for example, we didn't wait for a gallery to open up. We just rented a community hall and did this crazy show, art show. So we kind of just really I don't know if this is helping, but you can really just think about what you want to do and then figure out how to do it for yourself and essentially make more money from it. So
that helps. That's exactly the type of example I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Build your own demand
Yeah.
on a local scale,
Totally.
Rather than chasing the pro.
Underground shows, I'm telling you, people love that. Even post-pandemic, people are crazy for it. So if you need any help on that, I will be here. You can ask me how we did that. So yeah.
Yeah, to build on that, I did like a similar thing when I lived in Toronto. Like when I moved to Toronto, I would ask people like who's the hottest DJ in the city, and I would just book them, and then slowly, I would do like monthlies, and then slowly I started building a community out there, and then I started doing something similar in Ottawa. And another thing I tell artists is like at the end of the day, you're an entrepreneur. You know, like not every move that you make has to be a music move. Like the more you build your brand, the bigger a voice that you have. So it could be real estate, it could be like people opening a business and they want you involved. Like there'll be a lot of things that like fall on your table. So just like never see it as like, oh, like if I'm not doing music full time, then I'm not a musician. No, it's like you have to consider you making music full time as like you put music first. But if you have to get a part-time job to make it happen, there's nothing wrong with that. No. And don't run away from any type of conversations, because those can always lead back to the music, you know?
Yeah, and to add to that, like what I was going to say about like skill set is that if you have a specific skill set that you can offer to other artists or other individuals, you can really market that and become either consultant or you can work with them. Like we have one artist on our roster who is like perfect at promoting. Like can't promote her show worth hell, but that's another point. But like can promote everybody else's show and does an amazing job at it. And so like she really has started a little company for herself where she's promoting like not just like musicians but comedians and other things, other like artists, and makes really good money at it. And so she's still ingrained within the art community and is expanding her network and is making good money from it, so that she and has the flexibility that she can make her own music. So that's something to consider too, is like you can really look to see what skill sets you have that you can market out, or like, you know, and build from there. So each of my artists have a different skill set and they kind of work within that skill set too, and they make their own money while and none of them, does any of them work a normal job? No, they don't. But they do and they don't, but like none of them is like, you know, like working a 9 to 5, right? Mm-hmm. So you can really find ways of like taking what you already know and putting in there. The one thing with management, with managers, is like, I don't know if I'm a good manager, maybe, but I am good at sales, and I'm like, you know, like I'm fine. I'm really good at sales, and so that is where my strength comes in, that I can sell my artists. Because then I took it from that way instead of trying to be like, I'm not trying to be Scooter Braun, like, you know, I just want to be me. But I'm just taking a skill set and kind of repurposing it. So if you were to do that, you'll have a lot of success in, you know, generating revenue so you can continue working as an artist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Like working through your strengths and like what comes naturally is better than like trying to find a general rule book for how to succeed, what you need to do, like crossing off lists. Like I do think that like live shows, it like not only are you like introducing yourself to people watching you play, but you're also talking to the bartender who might be organizing a show next month. You're talking to the sound tech who probably also is doing other stuff on the side. So it's like, I mean, I met James through Swanee and Sala Rosa, who like helped us out a ton, and they do a lot of community stuff where it's like Sala Rosa in Montreal, the basement, Soterrenia, it's like a pretty underground basement space. You feel like you're at someone's house in their basement, but it's like, I've seen some of the cool shows there of like noise sets, like a lot of queer artists that Sala will just like let them use the space for very little or for free. So there's like room to, if you're like hitting a wall and not making the thing happen, there's room to, do it yourself, I guess. But definitely I wouldn't recommend like for like Backwash, for example, is excellent at Twitter. And I think that that's maybe one of the like, one of the really helpful routes for us is that like, especially during the pandemic, like not being able to do the live shows, it's like being able to connect in that way. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend for every person to get on Twitter and start tweeting. It's like, and then also like, if you're good at generating constant content, then a Patreon is great. But if it feels like it's another piece of work that's going to take away from what you actually want to be doing, which is making music or producing for other artists, like, then I wouldn't recommend doing it. Some people are really good at TikTok because it comes naturally to them, but it's also, you have to ask yourself, like, if this thing that I'm doing that I enjoy doing, if it does gain success and people are like into this part of me, then is it something that I want to keep doing? Because it's like, yeah, it's even opening for other musicians. If your style of music is different, but it's the style that you want to do, stick to that style. Because if you change yourself for something else to, like, you know, appeal and try to go that route, then you might get stuck there. Whereas if you do your thing that you want to be doing, there might be one or two people in the crowd that like really, really connect to it, and that's like building something more concrete, because it's like they're gonna stick around. They're not just like seeing you once and like, okay, cool, like they're like really connecting to you. So I think that can be applied to like anything online as well. Yeah.
And I mean, another avenue alongside creating show spaces is obviously community radio, which again doesn't pay, so not necessarily great on the sustainability front, but can be a really fantastic way to make connections. And if you get really engaged and start interviewing artists, it can be a real interesting pathway to make connections in the industry and to get known by other people who are doing stuff that you admire or look up to. Oh, we have one more question at the back. Yeah.
It sounds like there is money that is going to be gatekept by institutions who don't really want to like acknowledge the humanity and reality of like people who make art, and how is that going to change? Like, if artists have to find alternative funding, do you see anything improving in like the grant process, or like do you have to get in there and like diversify their panels, or what strategies do you implement?
I'll speak for Ottawa. I think there's a couple things. Like, my challenge in Ottawa in the past has been like, you know, going back to the token thing. Like, so I've played shows where, well, I didn't play shows, but there's been shows where they'll choose like the token black person in Canada, and they'll be like, "Yo, I'm gonna pay you way more," whereas, and then would want me to open, where I'm like, well, if we look at the stats in Ottawa, this person does not have a bigger fan base than me, so why do you feel like you shouldn't pay me like what I deserve, you know? And I think that needs to change. You know, festivals need to change that outlook, because I've seen it so many times that like, yeah, that headliner for someone else would come, the opener would be local, the crowd's going crazy, and then that person's done and nobody cares about the headliner like that, you know? The other thing is, I think, you know, the moment organization do give people of color opportunity, I do think they like, people need to be more engaged in the thing that got created. That, because a lot of times, like, yeah, they'll give people of color an opportunity to build something, but then that person will do something and no one will show up. So at the end of the day, it's business. If people are creating a space and no one's showing up, then why are they gonna invest in that, you know? So it's like, we gotta build, I don't know what the answer is for that is, but we gotta, you know, tell our friends or, you know, teach people in the city to engage and invest their time into investing artists or people that, and that's how that community is gonna build, and the economy in that industry will build. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you can ask for transparency from the grantor in terms of getting a breakdown of like who was selected. I don't know so much about music, and this is if you feel like you really want to like spearhead that change. Like, I can't speak on behalf of music, but in Calgary, after BLM, there was an individual who was really upset that galleries in Calgary, like so art galleries, wasn't exhibiting Black artists. And so they actually did a meta-analysis where they looked at all of the publicly ran or artist-run centers to see how many times they've exhibited artists, and it was abysmal on how many Black artists who actually were being exhibited or had an opportunity for residency. And it actually did drive a lot of change within the city, where it's prioritized. Because, you know, a lot of these institutions were claiming that they were inclusive and, you know, they're all about like diversity, and it just wasn't the case, right? So I think that if you are motivated and want to see change, you can really work with the granting bodies that you're interested in to see if they are being fair to artists, and be an advocate for artists and musicians within whoever, whether it's in your city or province, your country, to really push for that change. I think a lot of granting bodies, like, I don't know, I'm assuming, but I think they're very open to that because they're also looking to be as inclusive and as diverse as possible. So that's my advice.
Yeah, I think like in terms of like the really massive people who control such large sums of money that like it's like completely unfair. There's so much bureaucracy in that as well, and secrecy, that I don't know if like even going down that tunnel could like really drain a person. But I think that, yeah, finding the grants that could service that, like really focusing on those and like locally, like who are you able to talk to and have an honest conversation with? Those are all really good suggestions. But I think like something that comes to mind right now is like there's specific funding for events that are like, if they include a showcase, if they include a workshop, if they include a show, those are things that it's like, okay, if I can do those things, then what matters is the organization of that and not the subject matter, right? So it's like, you can also contact, like, for example, Debaser is fantastic. Pop Montreal, Swanee, these are all like people who've gotten funding before and built it over time, and held events that like wouldn't necessarily be featured at the Junos, you know? So there's like, I think when it's like those, when like before I started getting involved in music at all, like, and behind the scenes of things, I think my idea of like what a path of success in music needs to look like those big award shows and like those big broadcasters and all of that, like the more you learn, the more you're like, that's funny. So it's like, in those situations when it's something so big that it might like squash you, it's infuriating, and like hopefully over time the pressure and the more people like that realize the benefit and see the happiness of like putting on an amazing show, like they might want in on that eventually, and then it's up to you to decide if you know, depending on the contract and everything, if it makes sense, or if you're like, you know what, no, like we want to set our roots, like don't distract us, like kind of thing. Like it's like, I think that there are ways to do it. It is more, I think it kind of goes into the pros and cons thing of like doing this stuff as well, the way that like we're talking about doing them in different ways. It's the pro is that you get the creative freedom, you get to put all of this work into something and then look at it and go, yes, like that makes me so happy. And I thought that when I finish this project, I'll be like, I'm never doing this again. But seeing the like actual thing and being like, I want to start another one, like tomorrow, like it's the difference of that versus putting all of your energy and love into something that you then look at and go like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, this is really just, if it doesn't like feed your soul and make you like keep going kind of thing. I think that there's that, because it's the idea, sometimes we have to look at the ideas that we have of what could be and then realize like, wait, I've been here before. There's probably other routes that I don't know about yet.
I mean, I might have a slightly, I've had more success with grants, I think, than some of you. So I might have a slightly rosier picture. I think that there is meaningful desire on behalf of the granting bodies to figure out how to change. I think they're, I don't think they're necessary. I don't think that they necessarily know exactly how to change, but every few years, the Canada Council at least, and I believe the provincial art councils and the municipal councils will do things where they'll go into the communities where they fund things and ask for feedback about how they operate. And so for a long time, I mean, one example is for a long time, collectives couldn't apply to grants. You had to be like an individual artist or an organization. And then they were talking to people, and a lot of people who had duo practices or trio practices or small collectives were like, well, why are we shut out of this granting process just because we have a collaborative practice? That seems backwards. And the Canada Council said, oh, yeah, that is backwards. So now collectives are allowed to apply. I also know that one thing about the Canada Council juries is, and my experience with municipal juries too, is one of the things that is a very difficult balance for these funders to strike is the fact that their juries are usually quite small. So at the Canada Council level, it will be like usually for music, at least that's what I've had the most experience, a group of about 4 people looking at almost 200 applications. And in the municipal level, I've been on a jury that was even smaller than that in Montreal. There was 3 people looking at 300 applications. So obviously that's gonna kind of, to echo sort of what Fidelia was saying, you're gonna have situations where people are coming in with received ideas about what they think the narrative this is gonna be, and there's only so much counterbalance that can happen in a room of 3 or 4 people. That's like quite a small group. It's not, and they try to make sure that those groups are diverse, but obviously you're not gonna be able to represent the entire diversity of Canada in a group of 4 people. Like, even if everyone on that jury checks like 5 different boxes, you're still gonna leave someone out. So there's complication. I mean, there's just real practical considerations that I think that the funders are actively trying to struggle with. And one of the things, anyways, this is off to, I'm going on a spiel now. One of the things I think that could help all artists is a greater investment in infrastructure that's shared. One of the things you'll see people talking about a lot in music is how touring is becoming unsustainable. And part of that is that there aren't good medium-sized venues with artist housing attached, available in every city. If you had something like that, like we have hockey rinks in every city, if you had something like that, then artists would be much more encouraged to tour. It would benefit the local arts communities, and the artist could know, okay, I'm gonna play here, it's this kind of venue, they've got a housing that, or like accommodations that I can rely on. There, and that kind of being able to take that expense off the artist's back and share it among sort of all the artists who could possibly use it would go some distance into making touring in Canada more feasible, as an example of how infrastructure investment can really benefit. If you give money to one artist, that's great, but that's one artist. If you invest in infrastructure, you can create something that is to the benefit of a broad range of artists. But anyway, sorry. I'm supposed to moderate, not give my 2 cents.
I just wanted to say thank you so much for the wonderful discussion. And I'm not gonna lie, like I just got into grants last year and it's relentless, it's heartless. And the one thing I've learned is that as soon as the grant questions become available, I copy and paste them in a document and then obsess about it for 2 months. But the big pointer that I got was that if you follow up with your granting officer and you kind of pitch them like indirectly your project before writing out the questions, before going and answering all the grant questions, it really goes a long way because they're going to be like, well, this fund is unacceptable, and that could have been something that would have kicked you out completely from being considered for the grant. And the other thing too is like, if you don't beat yourself up about it, and you just follow up with them and you're like, hi, like why did I screw up and everything, or like what happened, I find it really helps because it also shows that you really are passionate about your project. And funny story, I got rejected, and just last week they called me and they were like, so when I got rejected, I was like, okay, what happened? They were like, you're so close, we just didn't have enough funding. And I got a call last week and they were like, we just got a surplus, so you're gonna end up getting the grant. So I think like, I would definitely encourage people to go into it, but when you go into it, don't spend more time than you wouldn't pay yourself, then you'd like become broke and everything, or you would have just swallowed 200 hours and like not even get anything back. And also, whenever you pitch a project, like pitch different projects according to the grant, because I kind of fucked myself over, like, and I was so obsessed with this project and I wanted it to get funded that I pitched it to the creation and production, and then I pitched it again for the seed grant, and then they decided to give it to me for the creation and production, but I had to back out of the seed grant. And they were like, well, you would have had the seed grant, but because now we've just given you the creation and production for the artist grants, you're gonna have to step down from the seed grant. So if I can help anyone, like, don't give up, or like, look at it as the book reports that you used to do in first grade that you really need to do, right? But I think definitely like your avenues of being self-funded are probably a lot better. I just censor myself a lot when I write grants, right?
Yeah. No, that's great advice. Thank you. That is great advice.
I think we're about time. So I did have like one last question, if we could maybe answer it really quickly, that I wanted to pose to y'all. It was kind of a jumping off, we sort of touched on it with that last question, but you know, if there's something that you could see change that would have helped your practice or helped your artist practice, help you grow, what do you think, you know, one thing, I know it's impossible, but that one change that you could see to how things are currently structured, to how things are currently mapped, that would help you and your artist practice grow or go that next step?
I think for me, more funding and infrastructure in the city. So, you know, more funding into like building labels out here or whatnot. Because again, that's what happened with most people, right? They felt like they didn't have access to resources, so they moved to another city. But if you build with liable people from the city that have those connections, that people won't have to leave the city to attain whatever they need to be successful.
I think just kind of like a blueprint that, especially in music, that sets out what a musician needs to do in order to get set up on the industry side. Like, you know, understanding all the royalty streams, understanding, you know, like SOCAN and like N-Factor and everything that you should be like getting accounts for and applying for, and like who your network is provincially as well as federally. I think that would be a big help for not only my artists now, but like any artists in the future. I think that would just set it. Actually, it will not only set up the musician for success, but also like gets them out of their own practice and think of them like their musical practice like beyond what they're creating. I think getting them into that mind space that they're a part of a bigger industry would be like essential. So that's what I would say.
You mean like realistic dream or big dream?
We're dreaming. Big.
Mean, get rid of the grants, give everyone money.
Yeah, exactly.
Basic income for everyone.
Yeah, UBI.
No, I mean, the biggest dream of all is that the bodies that often uphold like white supremacist values don't get like reallocating that money entirely, because I think that a lot of those bodies think that just diversifying their current spot or having articles that like are focused on like queer things or redemption stories or trauma, like it's not coming from like a place that is like organic. It's like just kind of putting a Band-Aid on it. So I think in a dream world, like something that would be a small percent to those like beasts, like being allocated to like community driven and community organizing is like people can do such cool stuff. And I think it is happening. Like this is like perfect examples of how it is happening. Yeah, that's the dream really.
For us, by us.
Yes.
As opposed to for the giant institution that used to have their boot on our neck.
Yeah. For real.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming. That is the time for Brave New Models. There's all sorts of stuff going on all evening and the rest of today, so highly encourage you to check out some more Pique programming.